It's been a long 42 years since Supergirl's last solo big-screen adventure. Then set in the Christopher Reeve-led cinematic universe, Helen Slater first put on the red skirt to battle Faye Dunaway's evil sorceress, Selena, all while earning the affection of local hunk Ethan, and navigating the social pitfalls of an all-girls academy. And we all know how that turned out. Cut to 2023's The Flash, where Sasha Calle was poised to take over for Henry Cavill's Superman in the DCEU, with a much more tortured take on the character, teaming up with Ezra Miller's Barry Allen and Michael Keaton's Batman to once again take down Michael Shannon's General Zod. And we all know how that turned out. And so here we are, Superman's long-lost cousin is back in cinemas for round 3. This time finding House of the Dragon breakout star Millie Alcock trading in the red and the blue for a dusty trench coat and a shot glass, drinking her way across the galaxy on a week-long birthday bender. Loosely inspired by Tom King's beloved 8-issue Woman of Tomorrow series, the film sees Kara Zor-El reluctantly joining forces with Eve Ridley's Ruthie to avenge the murder of her parents, with Jason Momoa's interstellar bounty hunter Lobo occasionally joining in the fun. And now we're all left asking, have they finally broken the Supergirl curse? One need only glance at any given comment section or thread to know that Craig Gillespie's Supergirl is dead on arrival for many critics and moviegoers, validating those resentful of the DCEU's demise or perhaps the cultural dominance of comic book properties on the whole, and sending lowly DCU fans into a frenzied state of emergency. Love or hate the film, it's undeniable that this is likely not the reception the fledgling studio was looking for. For some perspective, I've always been a devoted Superman fan, with Richard Donner's 1978 film still standing as my all-time favorite movie. And James Gunn's 2025 colorful and zany revival left me with a big smile on my face. I should also clarify that I have not read Woman of Tomorrow, so the source material will have no bearing on my opinion. That being said, it should come as no surprise that I found a lot to love in Supergirl, while at the same time understanding that it has fundamental issues and lots of room for improvement. Stylistically, the film is less Guardians of the Galaxy, as many have accused, and more Star Wars meets The Road Warrior, although the story itself is heavily influenced by the spaghetti western, or, more accurately, Akira Kurosawa's samurai films such as Yojimbo, if you really want to give credit where credit's due. Although cinematographer Rob Hardy has shot some of the more visually arresting films of the last decade, I admit that the film's canvas is ultimately a mixed bag. The environments feel gritty and lived in, and refreshingly, the movie looks like a movie, avoiding the flat TV lighting of many modern blockbusters by employing heavy shadows, lens flares, and tangible textures to the world. Unfortunately, this was all too often muddled by a few ugly visual effects shots and an earthy palette that kept colors from popping. Hardy and director Craig Gillespie were clearly chasing a rusty, post-apocalyptic aesthetic, but this derivative sameness does not translate well to an interplanetary revenge quest. It's a shame they didn't borrow from Mad Max Fury Road specifically, where a dry and desolate backdrop still retained its natural vibrance. Unfortunately, I must also say that most of the action is not shot or edited well, Gillespie and his editing team having the inclination to cut away to show onlookers' reactions, and at times even having fights play out in the background out of focus. While the action improves in the third act, making for a rousing conclusion, the movie needed that level of exhilaration throughout. However, many of these criticisms fell to the wayside, as it is the film's performances, especially from our two protagonists, that are its greatest strength. Millie Alcock is pitch perfect as Kara, giving us a less polished version of the Woman of Steel, who channels her pathos through a sharp tongue and steady intoxication, taking on a Rooster Cogburn-like role in the story. However, if you're seeking the more classic goody two-shoes approach to the character, you'll find little to enjoy here. Eve Ridley, who had small parts in Netflix's The Witcher and Three Body Problem, sells Ruthie's resolve and determination without overplaying it, while still maintaining her fish-out-of-water innocence and naivety. Her earnestness also makes for a fun contrast to Kara's devil-may-care attitude. While Jason Momoa was clearly born to play Lobo and as always is a delight to watch, the character is somewhat clumsily shoehorned in. The most obvious problem is that his motivations are too detached from the goals of our leads, and so he merely acts as an agent of chaos, popping in and out of various brawls solely to participate in the mayhem without ever really having a stake, personal or otherwise, in any of it. All that being said, I'd like to give bonus points to the sound department. Lobo's heavy chains, leathery outfit, and sizzling cigars really beefing up the character's domineering presence. Belgian actor Matthias Schoenaerts takes on the film's big bad, Krem of the Yellow Hills, a merciless pirate and human trafficker whose inexplicable super strength is enough to put Kara's own powers to the test. As the primary antagonist, the character is pretty one-note and maybe a little too cartoonish to be taken all that seriously. More or less on par with Thor the Dark World's Malekith and Guardian of the Galaxy's Ronan the Accuser. Regardless, Schoenaerts still delivered a fairly despicable portrayal, the character seeming to take clownish joy in slaughtering the innocent, but in the end felt like a galactic bully who needed to be put in his place. We also see brief but memorable flashback appearances from David Corenswet's Superman, and I definitely perked up the most in his scenes, although that is likely due to personal bias. David Krumholtz and Emily Beecham also show up as Kara's parents in an especially emotional sequence. And of course, what would any super family movie be without Krypto, who is used effectively if not a little manipulatively. Composer Claudia Sarn took on what is easily her most high-profile project to date, and offers up a perfectly serviceable score, but one that is just shy of having its own identity. For me, the most disappointing aspect is the absence of a proper theme, and not even a hint of the Superman march is anywhere to be found. Instead, the film relies on rock and pop music needle drops as a crutch for the soundtrack, which takes away from their impact. Although, in isolation, they mostly worked, and even the so-called controversial song dropped amidst the climactic action was a standout moment for me. At this point, it's difficult to say where many of the film's troubles began. Setting aside the should Supergirl have been the second film in the DCU debate, it's fair to ask if Gillespie was the right choice, or if an untested screenwriter was the best person for the job, or why James Gunn and Peter Safran let these issues slip by without a guiding hand. As far as the script goes, I do feel that Ana Nogueira has been unfairly targeted by the fandom. The truth being that we don't know if what ended up on screen is a one-to-one translation of her original screenplay, given the numerous changes most films undergo throughout production. Of course, if it turns out that this is exactly the script she submitted and Gunn so enthusiastically approved, then further questions and concerns are warranted.
Oh, that might be a problem.
However, I can't deny the emotional moments truly resonated with me, and I found myself tearing up more than once. Although, like so much of the film, these beats needed a little more time to play out. The destruction and escape from Krypton and the small bits and pieces we see of Argo City were all handled exceptionally. But again, more time could have been spent here, and further underlines the fact that editing seems to be the film's greatest downfall. The first act is jarring and choppy, playing out almost like a montage and not resting on any given scene, with a lot of footage blatantly trimmed out. Although it sags here and there in the middle, the film has a strong finish, and I can confidently say that I had the most fun in the third act, despite it also feeling like entire segments had been axed, with major plot points and world building being introduced without explanation or buildup. Overall, the film could have used another 15 to 20 minutes to lay the groundwork and let its characters and audience soak up the story.
Let's be honest, babe, it's not a very high bar to clear.
But beyond the film itself, what does all of this mean for the future of the DCU? With Paramount's inevitable acquisition of Warner Brothers, there's still so much up in the air, although all signs appear to be pointing to Gunn and Safran continuing with their vision. In all honesty, with Lanterns coming in August and Clayface in October, I expect that Supergirl will be long forgotten by the time Man of Tomorrow arrives in 2027. And really, that's too bad. However, I think time will be much kinder to this Supergirl than past iterations, and hopefully it will be elevated in hindsight with the context of her continued adventures. Ultimately, it's a film that takes swings at greatness, but just falls short. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and click like below and feel free to share. And don't forget to find me on Patreon at /Leighton Eversole, where you'll gain early access to my channel's content and more. And of course, if you want to see more videos just like this one, go ahead and click subscribe.